Derek actually laughed out loud when the lawyer read that part of Bobby's will. The old safe in the study, the one everyone knew was empty, left to his stepmother who'd already lost everything else. Vanessa was recording it on her phone, probably planning some cruel social media post about the pathetic old woman who got nothing but a rusty metal box. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The whole room felt like a celebration of my erasure, 32 years of marriage reduced to a hollow joke. But what they didn't know was that Bobby and I had been playing chess while they thought we were playing checkers. That empty safe was never the real prize. It was just the decoy. Because 6 months before Bobby passed, we'd filled a safety deposit box at First National with something worth more than Derek's entire real estate portfolio. And I had the only key. My name is Margaret Chen, though everyone who knows me calls me Maggie, and I'm 68 years old. I spent the last 8 months watching my husband Bobby fade away from pancreatic cancer, while his son Derek circled our life like a hungry shark. Today I'm sitting in James Patterson's law office on 3rd Street in downtown Riverside, wearing the jade bracelet Bobby gave me for our 20th anniversary, listening to his final will being read to a room full of people who couldn't wait to see me disappear. The office smells like old leather and disappointment, with those heavy burgundy drapes that block out most of the California sunshine. Derek sits directly across from me in his expensive charcoal suit, checking his Rolex every few minutes like this whole thing is keeping him from more important business. His wife Vanessa perches next to him in designer everything, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone screen as she live streams our family's destruction to her Instagram followers. She probably captioned it something like "watching karma in action" or "truth always wins," because that's the kind of person she is. Bobby's sister Eleanor drove down from Sacramento for this, though she hasn't spoken to me in 3 years, not since I supposedly turned Bobby against the family by suggesting we spend Christmas at home instead of hosting her ungrateful adult children who only show up when they need money. She keeps shooting me these satisfied little glances like she's finally getting the vindication she's been waiting for. And then there's Bobby's business partner, Tom, who sold his share of Chen's fine jewelry to Derek 2 months ago while Bobby was too sick to fight it, sitting there like he's attending a funeral instead of a legal proceeding. The lawyer, James Patterson, is a kind man in his 60s who's been handling Bobby's legal affairs for almost 15 years. I can see the genuine sadness in his eyes as he reads through the document, because he knew Bobby when he was healthy and sharp and full of life. He knew the man who built 3 successful jewelry stores from nothing, who could appraise a diamond just by feeling its weight in his palm, who taught me everything I know about precious stones during those long evenings in his workshop behind our house on Maple Street. To my beloved wife Margaret, Patterson reads, and my heart jumps because it's the first time my name has been mentioned in 20 minutes of legal language. I leave the contents of the safe in my study, along with my personal tools and the jade collection we built together over our 32 years of marriage. Derek's laugh comes out sharp and bitter. "The empty safe," he says loud enough for everyone to hear. "How perfect." Vanessa actually giggles, a sound like breaking glass. "Bobby finally came to his senses," she whispers, but she's not really whispering. She wants me to hear it. She wants everyone to hear it. Eleanor nods like this is exactly what she expected. "Some people think they can buy their way into a family," she says, staring right at me. "But blood is blood." And I sit there taking it, holding Bobby's jeweler's loop in my left hand, the one he used every single day for 46 years, the one his father gave him when he first started learning the trade. The metal is worn smooth from decades of use, and I can feel the tiny scratches where Bobby's thumb used to rest. I focus on that instead of their voices, instead of the way they're all looking at me like I'm something stuck to the bottom of their shoes. Patterson continues reading, his voice growing quieter as he reaches the end. "To my son Derek, I leave the family business, Chen's fine jewelry, along with all associated properties, inventory, and accounts receivable. To my sister Eleanor, I leave my father's watch collection and the photograph albums from our childhood. To my friend and partner Tom Bradley, I leave my gratitude for 20 years of loyal service and the red Mustang in the garage. Derek is already pulling out his phone, probably texting his real estate agent about putting the house on the market. Vanessa is practically bouncing in her seat, no doubt calculating how much money they just inherited. Eleanor is nodding with satisfaction, and Tom looks relieved that he got something. Anything. After selling his soul 2 months ago. Are there any questions about the distribution of assets? Patterson asks, though his tone suggests he hopes there aren't. Just one, Derek says, leaning back in his chair like he owns the place, which I guess he basically does now. When do we need the house cleared out? He's talking about me like I'm not sitting 3 feet away from him, like I'm a piece of furniture that needs to be disposed of. The will doesn't specify a timeline for Mrs. Chen to relocate, Patterson says carefully. That would be something you'd need to discuss privately. Well, I'm discussing it now, Derek says. 30 days seems reasonable. That's what we'd give any other tenant. Tenant. 32 years of marriage, and I'm a tenant. Vanessa leans forward, her voice dripping with fake concern. We're not trying to be mean, Maggie. It's just that Derek has investors interested in the property, and we can't really move forward with our plans while you're still there. Their plans. I helped Bobby plant the lemon tree in the backyard. I painted every room in that house at least twice. I know which step on the front porch creaks, and exactly how to jiggle the handle on the hall bathroom door when it sticks. I know that house better than my own heartbeat, and they're talking about it like it's just another piece of real estate to flip. I understand, I say quietly, and my voice doesn't shake even though everything inside me is trembling. 30 days. Derek nods once, sharp and dismissive. Good. Tom will handle the business transition, and we'll have the house appraised next week. Actually, I say, and everyone looks at me like they're surprised I'm still capable of speech. I have something to add. The room goes silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on 3rd Street. Patterson raises his eyebrows, clearly not expecting any complications from the grieving widow who just got publicly humiliated. I reach into my purse, the black leather one Bobby bought me in San Francisco 5 years ago when we took that weekend trip to celebrate our anniversary. My fingers find the small velvet pouch I've been carrying since the morning Bobby died, the one that holds more than just sentimental value. Bobby and I made some additional arrangements, I say, pulling out a small brass key attached to a blue ribbon. Arrangements that weren't included in the will. Derek's expression shifts from satisfied to confused. What kind of arrangements? I stand up slowly, my knees protesting after sitting in that uncomfortable chair for over an hour. The key catches the afternoon light streaming through Patterson's window, and I can see the numbers etched into the metal, 1847. The same as our address on Maple Street. The safe in Bobby's study, I say, looking directly at Derek. You're right. It is empty. It's been empty for 6 months. Vanessa frowns, her phone lowering for the first time since we arrived. Then why would he leave you an empty safe? I smile for the first time in weeks, the kind of smile that comes from knowing something other people don't. Because Bobby was a smart man. He knew that sometimes the most valuable things aren't kept where people expect to find them. Eleanor sits up straighter. What are you talking about, Margaret? I'm talking about the fact that while Derek was pressuring Bobby to change his will, while Vanessa was posting pictures of our house on her Instagram with captions about future renovation potential, while all of you were planning how to divide up his life before he was even gone, Bobby and I were making sure the most important things stayed safe. I hold up the key so everyone can see it clearly. This opens Safety Deposit Box 1847 at First National Bank. The one Bobby and I opened 6 months ago. The one where he moved everything that really mattered. Derek's face has gone completely white. That's impossible. Dad would have told me about any safety deposit boxes. Would he? I ask. The same way he told you about changing the combination on his safe? The same way he told you about meeting with Patterson 3 different times in January? Your father told you exactly what he wanted you to know, Derek. Nothing more. Patterson is staring at me with something that might be admiration mixed with professional curiosity. Mrs. Chen, if your husband opened a safety deposit box that contains assets not listed in his will, Then those assets belong to whoever's name is on the signature card, I finish. Which would be me, as the surviving account holder. The silence in the room is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Derek is gripping his phone so hard his knuckles have gone white. Vanessa has stopped recording, her mouth hanging open like she's catching flies. Eleanor looks like she just swallowed something sour. "What's in the box?" Derek asks, and his voice has lost all its earlier confidence. I slip the key back into the velvet pouch and return it to my purse. Bobby's life's work. Every rare stone he ever set aside. Every investment piece he couldn't bear to sell. Every piece of documentation about the real value of Chen's fine jewelry. Everything he spent 46 years building. Tom speaks up for the first time since the reading began. "Maggie, that's impossible. We did inventory of everything in the stores just last month." "You did inventory of everything that was supposed to be there," I correct him. But Bobby was always careful about keeping his best pieces separate. "Insurance purposes," he said. "Professional habit. Some stones are too valuable to keep in a regular jewelry store safe." Derek stands up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous." "You're making this up." "Am I?" I ask. "Would you like to drive over to First National with me right now? I can show you exactly what's in that box. Of course, you won't be able to access it yourselves, since only I have signature authority. But I'm happy to let you watch while I open it." Vanessa finally finds her voice. "Derek, she's bluffing. She has to be bluffing." But Derek is looking at me differently now, and I can see the exact moment when he realizes that maybe, just maybe, he underestimated the quiet Chinese woman his father married 32 years ago. The woman who worked alongside Bobby every single day, who learned to grade diamonds and evaluate emeralds, who helped him build his business from a single storefront to 3 locations across Riverside County. "How much?" he asks quietly. "How much what? How much is in the box?" I pick up my purse and walk toward the door. "More than you can afford to lose," I say. "More than you can afford to ignore. And definitely more than you thought you were getting when you started planning Bobby's funeral before he was even dead." I stop at the doorway and turn back to face the room. Derek is still preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Still standing, his expensive suit wrinkled from sitting too long, his face pale under his artificial tan. Vanessa is frantically typing something on her phone, probably Googling, quote, "safety deposit box inheritance laws," or texting her followers that the story just took an unexpected turn. Eleanor has that pinched look she gets when things don't go according to her plans, and Patterson is sitting back in his chair with the faintest hint of a smile on his face. 30 days, I say to Derek. That's what you gave me to get out of the house. I'll give you 30 days to figure out whether you want to keep pretending that empty safe was all Bobby left behind, or whether you want to have a real conversation about what he actually wanted for his family. I walk out of that office and into the bright California sunshine, and for the first time since Bobby died, I feel like I can breathe again. Behind me, I can hear voices rising in heated discussion, but I don't look back. I have a phone call to make to Frank Morrison, Bobby's oldest friend, and the man who helped us set up that safety deposit box. I have a key to turn and a vault to open, and I have 30 days to teach Derek and his wife exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman who spent 3 decades learning everything there is to know about what makes things truly valuable. The parking meter on 3rd Street still has 20 minutes left on it, and I sit in Bobby's old Honda Civic with the windows down, listening to the sounds of downtown Riverside going about its business. People walking by with their coffee cups and their smartphones, completely unaware that somewhere above them, in a law office with burgundy drapes, a family is discovering that greed doesn't always win, and that sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should fear the most. I pull out my phone and dial Frank's number, the same number I've been calling for 15 years whenever Bobby and I needed financial advice or just wanted to catch up with an old friend. "Maggie?" Frank's voice is warm and concerned. "How did it go?" "Exactly like we thought it would," I tell him. "Derek got the business, everyone got their trinkets, and I got the empty safe." "And?" And now they know there's something else, something they can't touch. Frank chuckles, the sound of a man who's seen enough family drama over 40 years in banking to know how these stories usually end. You ready for what comes next? I look up at the law office window where I can see Derek pacing back and forth, his arms waving as he argues with someone on his phone. Probably his lawyer or his accountant or whoever he thinks can help him figure out how to get his hands on what's in that safety deposit box. Bobby and I planned for this, I say. We knew Derek would never respect me, never see me as anything more than the outsider who married into the family. But we also knew that respect isn't given, Frank. It's earned. And today, I started earning it. What's your next move? I start the car and pull away from the curb, driving slowly through the downtown streets where Bobby and I used to walk on Sunday afternoons, window shopping and planning our future together. The future that Derek thought ended the day Bobby died. First, I'm going to stop by the bank and check on our box, make sure everything is still exactly where we left it. Then I'm going home to the house they think they can take away from me, and I'm going to water Bobby's lemon tree and sit in his workshop and remember why we did all this. And then I'm going to wait for Derek to make his next move. Because he will, Frank. Men like Derek always do. They can't stand the idea that someone else might be holding the winning cards. And when he makes that move, when he tries to bully me or threaten me or find some legal way to get what he thinks he deserves, I'll be ready for him. With what? I smile as I turn onto Maple Street, where the afternoon sun is filtering through the palm trees and casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Where Bobby and I built a life together, where we loved each other and fought sometimes and made up and grew old together in the house that Derek thinks he can just take away. With the truth, Frank. With 32 years of truth that Derek never bothered to learn because he was too busy being angry that his father chose love over blood. With documentation and witnesses and evidence that Bobby was a lot smarter than his son ever gave him credit for. And with the knowledge that the empty safe was never the real treasure. I pull into the driveway of 1847 Maple Street, the same address that's etched into the key in my purse. The same address where Bobby and I planned our strategy 6 months ago when we knew his time was running out and Derek's greed was running over. The real treasure, Frank, is knowing that Bobby trusted me with everything that mattered. And Derek is about to find out exactly what that means. Frank Morrison has been Bobby's closest friend since they were teenagers, working at their father's shops on opposite sides of downtown Riverside. Frank's dad ran Morrison Hardware, while Bobby's father built the original Chen's Fine Jewelry from nothing but a dream and a small loan from the Chinese Merchants Association. Now Frank sits across from me at Sonny's Diner on Route 91, the same vinyl booth where Bobby and I used to come every Tuesday night for the early bird special, and his weathered hands wrap around a coffee cup that's seen better decades. The diner hasn't changed much in 30 years. Same cracked linoleum floors, same faded photographs of 1950s, Riverside hanging crooked on the walls, same waitress named Dolores who never writes down orders but somehow remembers that I like my eggs over easy and my hash browns extra crispy. The smell of bacon grease and fresh coffee grounds fills the air, mixing with the afternoon heat that seeps through the windows, despite the rattling air conditioner working overtime above our heads. Frank's eyes are the same pale blue they've always been, but now they're surrounded by more wrinkles than I remember, and his thick gray hair has retreated further from his forehead since Bobby's funeral 6 weeks ago. He's wearing his usual uniform of pressed khakis and a short-sleeved button-down shirt, the practical clothes of a man who spent 43 years managing other people's money at First National Bank before retiring last spring to tend his tomato garden and spoil his grandchildren. "Tell me about the house," Frank says, stirring sugar into his coffee with the deliberate precision of someone who's measured things for a living. "What exactly did Derek say about the 30 days? I pull out my phone and scroll to the text message Derek sent me 3 hours after we left Patterson's office. The message is short and brutal in its efficiency. "Maggie, spoke with Realtor. House appraisal scheduled Monday. Please have personal items packed and ready for storage. Professional cleaners coming Thursday. Closing date tentative for end of month. We'll discuss moving assistance if needed. Derek." Frank reads it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. "Moving assistance if needed," he repeats, Like he's doing you a favor. He probably thinks he is, I say, though the words taste bitter in my mouth. Derek's always been good at convincing himself that his selfishness is actually generosity. When Bobby had his first cancer scare 2 years ago, Derek suggested we sell the house and move into one of those senior living places in Palm Springs. Said it would be more practical for our situation. What did Bobby say to that? He told Derek that the day he couldn't take care of his own home was the day he'd take care of Derek's inheritance. Derek didn't bring it up again, but I could see him calculating, waiting, planning for this exact moment. Frank nods slowly. We've talked about Derek before, during those long evenings when Bobby was getting his chemotherapy treatments and Frank would stop by to sit with me in the hospital waiting room. Frank never said much about Derek directly, but I could see the disapproval in his eyes whenever Derek would show up at the hospital with his real estate investor friends, talking loudly about maximizing property values and strategic neighborhood development, while his father was fighting for his life 3 rooms away. Bobby was worried about this, Frank says quietly, not just Derek getting the business, but what Derek would do with it. The way he talks about the stores, like they're just assets to be optimized instead of places where Bobby built relationships with customers over decades. This is what people don't understand about Bobby's business. Chen's Fine Jewelry wasn't just 3 stores selling engagement rings and anniversary gifts. It was where Maria Santos bought her daughter's quinceañera earrings, where the Johnson family has purchased every wedding ring for 4 generations, where Bobby would spend hours helping young couples find the perfect stone within their budget, because he remembered being young and in love and worried about money. Bobby knew his customers' stories, their anniversaries, their children's birthdays. He kept handwritten notes about their preferences and would call them personally when something special came in that he thought they might like. Derek sees spreadsheets and profit margins. Bobby saw families and memories and the weight of precious metals that carried people's promises to love each other forever. There's something else, I tell Frank, pulling a manila envelope from my purse. Something I didn't mention at the lawyer's office because I wanted to see what Derek would do first. Frank opens the envelope carefully and slides out 3 photographs printed on regular copy paper. The first shows Bobby and me standing in front of our safety deposit box at First National 6 months ago, both of us smiling despite the circumstances that brought us there. Bobby is holding his jeweler's loupe in one hand and a small velvet bag in the other. I'm wearing the jade bracelet he gave me for our 20th anniversary, the one I never take off, and my hair is pulled back in the neat bun I always wear when we're working with valuable stones. The second photograph shows the contents of the safety deposit box laid out on the bank's private viewing table. Even in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the vault area, the stones catch the light and throw it back in brilliant flashes of color. There are rubies from Myanmar that Bobby acquired from a dealer in San Francisco, emeralds from Colombia that he'd been saving for a special commission that never came, diamonds ranging from modest 1-carat stones to a remarkable 5-carat round brilliant that he'd planned to set for our 40th anniversary. There are also several pieces of finished jewelry that Bobby considered too precious to keep in the store safes, including a platinum necklace with natural pearls that belonged to his grandmother, and a pair of sapphire earrings that he designed for me but never gave me because he said he was waiting for the right occasion. The third photograph shows Bobby's hands holding a thick folder marked, quote, Chen's Fine Jewelry, Private Holdings and Valuations. Inside that folder, according to the documentation Bobby showed me that day, are detailed appraisals of every stone in the safety deposit box, certificates of authenticity for the most valuable pieces, and most importantly, a complete inventory of all the rare stones and specialty items that Bobby had removed from the store locations over the past 5 years and stored in the vault for safekeeping. Frank studies each photograph for a long time, occasionally whistling softly under his breath. As a retired bank manager, he knows enough about jewelry valuations to understand what he's looking at. More importantly, as Bobby's friend, he knows the stories behind some of these pieces. That sapphire necklace, he says, pointing to a delicate piece visible in the second photograph. Isn't that the one Bobby made for the mayor's wife in 1998? She special ordered it for their silver anniversary, then decided she didn't like the setting after Bobby had already completed the work. She refused to pay for it, and Bobby couldn't bring himself to break it apart because he'd spent 3 months getting the stones to match perfectly. He's been carrying it as a loss on his books for 26 years. And this? Frank taps the photograph near a cluster of loose stones that seem to glow even in the flat lighting. Those are the investment stones Bobby bought whenever he had extra cash flow. He'd find estate sales or private collections being liquidated, and if he saw something exceptional at a good price, he'd buy it and hold it. Some of those stones have tripled in value since he acquired them. Frank sets the photographs down and looks at me with something that might be amazement mixed with concern. Maggie, do you have any idea what all this is worth? I reach into my purse again and pull out a single sheet of paper folded in quarters. It's a summary page that Bobby printed from his private computer the week before he died, after he'd finished cataloging everything in the safety deposit box. The paper is slightly yellowed already, and Bobby's handwriting in the margins is shakier than it used to be, but the numbers are clear enough. Conservative retail value, assuming current market prices for precious stones and metals, I read aloud. $437,600. Estimated auction value for rare and unique pieces, $520,000 to $615,000. Frank's coffee cup stops halfway to his mouth. Jesus, Maggie. And that's just the jewelry and loose stones. It doesn't include the documentation about the business practices Derek's been changing since Bobby got sick. It doesn't include the contracts and agreements Bobby made with suppliers that Derek has been quietly canceling so he can work with cheaper vendors. And it definitely doesn't include the information about the insurance policies Bobby maintained on some of the store inventory that Derek doesn't know about. What kind of information? I unfold the paper completely and point to a section near the bottom written in Bobby's careful handwriting. Bobby discovered that Derek had been underinsuring the store inventory to save money on premiums. When Bobby confronted him about it, Derek said the insurance was unnecessary because they had good security systems. But Bobby knew that if anything happened to one of the stores, if there was a break-in or a fire or even just a significant theft, the insurance wouldn't cover the actual replacement value of the inventory. So Bobby took out additional policies, private policies on specific high-value items, with himself as the beneficiary. Derek thinks the stores are protected by the basic commercial insurance, but if something happens, those policies won't cover about 60% of the actual inventory value. Bobby has the documentation for the private policies in the safety deposit box, along with current appraisal certificates for every item covered. Frank leans back in the booth, and I can see him processing this information with the methodical precision of someone who spent 4 decades navigating complex financial situations. Outside the diner windows, the afternoon traffic on Route 91 flows past in an endless stream of commuters heading home from their jobs in Los Angeles, none of them aware that inside this unremarkable building, 2 senior citizens are discussing what amounts to a financial time bomb. Derek doesn't know about any of this. Bobby tried to discuss the insurance situation with Derek 6 months ago, but Derek dismissed it as unnecessary worry. He said Bobby was being paranoid, and that the existing coverage was adequate. Bobby decided not to push the issue, but he also decided not to cancel the private policies. He figured Derek would learn the hard way, eventually. And the supplier contracts? Derek's been systematically replacing Bobby's longtime suppliers with cheaper alternatives. Some of these suppliers had exclusive agreements with Bobby going back decades. They gave him first option on exceptional stones, special pricing for bulk orders, payment terms that allowed him to take advantage of opportunities when they came up. Derek canceled most of these agreements so he could negotiate what he thought were better deals with new suppliers. Frank shakes his head slowly. Let me guess. The new suppliers don't have the same relationships, don't have access to the same quality stones, and probably don't offer the same payment flexibility. Exactly. And some of Bobby's old suppliers are pretty upset about being dropped after 20 or 30 years of exclusive business. Bobby has documentation about which suppliers Derek alienated and what those relationships were actually worth to the business. This is more than just a family inheritance dispute, Frank says, his banker's instincts clearly engaged. This is about Derek systematically undermining a business he doesn't understand while thinking he's improving it. I fold the paper and put it back in my purse, next to the key to the safety deposit box. Bobby knew Derek would do this. Bobby spent 46 years building relationships and learning the jewelry business. And Derek spent 6 months trying to optimize it like it was some corporate acquisition project. Bobby also knew that Derek would try to push me out of the picture as quickly as possible, which is why we set up the safety deposit box. What's your plan? This is the question I've been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. For 6 months, ever since Bobby and I first walked into First National Bank and rented that safety deposit box, I've known this moment would come. The moment when I'd have to decide whether to fight or walk away, whether to honor Bobby's trust in me, or just take the money and disappear quietly, like Derek expects me to. Tomorrow morning, I'm going back to the bank to document everything in the safety deposit box. I want photographs of every single piece, updated appraisals for anything that might have changed in value, and copies of all the business documentation Bobby stored there. I want everything organized and properly cataloged so there's no question about what Bobby intended. And then I'm going to give Derek exactly what he asked for. 30 days to decide what kind of man he wants to be. I'm going to present him with a choice. He can continue down the path he's on, treating me like an obstacle to be removed, and treating his father's business like a commodity to be optimized. Or he can acknowledge that Bobby was smarter than Derek gave him credit for, and that maybe there are things about the family business that Derek doesn't understand yet. Frank nods, but I can see the concern in his eyes. And if he chooses the first option, then Derek is going to learn some very expensive lessons about the difference between owning a business and understanding it. And I'm going to make sure that Bobby's customers, suppliers, and employees know exactly what Derek inherited and what he threw away. The sun is starting to set outside the diner windows, casting long shadows across the parking lot where Bobby's Honda Civic sits next to Frank's old pickup truck. Soon it will be time to drive home to the house on Maple Street, to walk through the rooms Bobby and I shared for 32 years, to sit in his workshop and remember the sound of his voice explaining the difference between a well-cut stone and a perfect one. But first, there's one more thing I need to tell Frank, one more piece of the puzzle that I haven't shared with anyone yet. There's something else, I say, pulling out my phone and scrolling to a text message I received this morning. Something that makes me think Derek is already more worried than he's letting on. The message is from a number I don't recognize, but the content makes it clear who sent it. Mrs. Chen, this is Brad Hoffman from Hoffman & Associates Real Estate. Derek Chen asked me to contact you about scheduling a walkthrough of your property at 1847 Maple Street. I have several interested investors who would like to view the house this week. Please call me at your earliest convenience to arrange access. Frank reads the message and frowns. He's already lined up buyers? It gets better, I say, scrolling to the next message, which came an hour after the first one. Mrs. Chen, I also wanted to mention that Derek indicated you might be willing to consider a leaseback arrangement if the right buyer makes an offer. We have clients who specialize in senior housing solutions and might be interested in allowing you to remain in the property as a tenant if that would be helpful. A tenant, Frank repeats, and his voice carries the same disbelief I felt when I first read the message. In the house you've lived in for 32 years. Derek's not just planning to sell the house, Frank. He's planning to sell it to investors who'll turn it into a rental property and then generously allow me to stay on as their tenant. He probably thinks he's being incredibly thoughtful and practical. Frank's jaw tightens, and for a moment I can see the younger man he used to be, the one who played high school football and never backed down from a fight when someone was being treated unfairly. What did you tell the realtor? I haven't responded yet. I wanted to talk to you first, to make sure I'm thinking about this clearly. What's to think about? Derek's trying to sell your house out from under you before Bobby's even been gone 2 months. But that's just it, Frank. Derek thinks he's being smart, moving quickly while I'm still grieving and confused. He thinks I don't understand the legal situation, that I don't know what my rights are, that I'll be grateful for whatever scraps he throws my way. And he's about to discover that the confused, grieving widow he thinks he's dealing with spent 32 years learning the jewelry business from a man who never made a deal without knowing exactly what every party involved was really after. I finish my coffee and signal Dolores for the check. Outside, the traffic on Route 91 is starting to thin as the evening commute winds down, and the neon sign for the diner flickers on in the growing dusk. Bobby used to say that the most dangerous thing in any negotiation was someone who underestimated what you knew and overestimated what they could get away with, I tell Frank as we prepare to leave. Derek's about to learn that lesson the hard way. What's your next move? Tomorrow I go to the bank and document everything in the safety deposit box. Tomorrow evening I call that realtor and schedule the walkthrough Derek wants. And tomorrow night I start making some phone calls to Bobby's old suppliers and customers, just to let them know that changes are coming to Chen's fine jewelry and that they might want to understand what those changes mean before they decide whether to continue doing business with Derek. Frank pays the check despite my protests, and we walk out into the warm California evening together. The parking lot gravel crunches under our feet, and somewhere in the distance a train whistle blows as the evening freight heads east toward the desert. You sure you're ready for this fight? Frank asks as we reach our cars. I look back at the diner, where Dolores is wiping down the booth, where Bobby and I shared so many Tuesday night dinners, where we planned our retirement and talked about traveling to see the grandchildren Derek never brings around anymore, where we made the decision to move our most precious possessions to the safety deposit box, because we knew Derek would never understand their real value. I've been ready for this fight since the day Derek told Bobby that the family business would be more profitable if they stopped wasting time on sentimental customers and focused on volume sales, I say. Bobby died believing that someone would protect what he built. I'm not going to let him down. And if Derek surprises you? If he turns out to be more reasonable than you expect? I unlock the Honda and slide behind the wheel, inhaling the familiar scent of Bobby's aftershave that still lingers in the fabric of the driver's seat. Then we'll have a different conversation. But Frank, I've watched Derek operate for 2 years while Bobby was getting sick. I've seen how he treats people he thinks are beneath him, how he talks about the customers like they're just revenue sources, how he looks at me like I'm an expensive problem he inherited along with everything else. Fair enough. Derek had 32 years to learn to respect me, to appreciate what Bobby and I built together, to understand that love and loyalty aren't line items you can optimize away. He chose not to learn those lessons when it would have been easy. Now he's going to learn them when it's hard. I start the car and roll down the windows to let the evening air flow through. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new confrontations, new opportunities to prove that the quiet woman Bobby fell in love with 32 years ago is stronger than Derek ever imagined. Tonight, I'm going home to water Bobby's lemon tree and sit in his workshop and remember why we fought so hard to protect what mattered most. The safety deposit box key feels solid and warm in my pocket as I drive toward Maple Street, toward the house Derek thinks he can take away from me, toward the life Bobby and I built one careful decision at a time. Derek wanted 30 days to clear me out and move on with his plans. He's going to get exactly what he asked for, just not in the way he expected. Derek's first mistake was thinking the fight was over before it started. His second mistake was underestimating how much Bobby taught me about the difference between having power and knowing how to use it. Tomorrow, Derek starts learning about that difference. And by the time 30 days are up, he's going to understand exactly why Bobby chose to trust me with everything that really mattered. The house on Maple Street sits quiet and welcoming in the gathering darkness, its windows glowing with the warm light Bobby installed, because he said a home should always look like someone was happy to be there. Inside, Bobby's workshop waits with his tools arranged exactly as he left them, his appraisal notes stacked neatly on his desk, his jeweler's loupe resting on the green felt pad where he examined stones for 46 years. And in my purse, the key to safety deposit box 1847 waits for tomorrow's revelation, when Derek discovers that the empty safe was never the prize he thought he'd won. It was just the beginning of a much larger game, one that Bobby and I spent 6 months preparing for, and one that Derek is about to lose before he even realizes he's playing it. The morning air in Riverside carries the scent of orange blossoms and exhaust fumes as I drive toward First National Bank on University Avenue. It's barely 8 o'clock, but the California sun is already warming the asphalt and promising another scorching day ahead. I've been awake since 5, sitting in Bobby's workshop with a cup of coffee and the spare key to safety deposit box 1847, running my fingers over the metal surface and thinking about everything that led to this moment. The bank parking lot is nearly empty, except for a few employee vehicles clustered near the staff entrance. I recognize Janet Kellerman's blue Toyota near the back row. Janet has been working in the vault services department for 12 years, and she's the one who helped Bobby and me set up the safety deposit box 6 months ago. She remembers our story, remembers the way Bobby's hand shook slightly as he signed the signature cards, remembers how carefully he arranged each item in the box like he was creating a museum display. The bank's lobby echoes with the hollow sound of my footsteps on polished marble as I approach the customer service desk. The young man behind the counter can't be more than 25, with perfectly styled hair and a name tag that reads, Marcus, Personal Banking Specialist. He greets me with the kind of professionally cheerful smile that all bank employees learn during their first week of training. Good morning, Mrs. Chen, he says, clearly recognizing me from my previous visits. How can I help you today? I need to access my safety deposit box, I tell him, sliding my identification and the brass key across the counter. Box 1847. Marcus types something into his computer and frowns slightly. I see there's a note here about recent account activity. Let me get Janet from Vault Services to assist you. Within minutes, Janet appears from the back offices, her gray hair pulled into its usual neat bun, and her face wearing the kind of gentle concern that comes from years of helping customers through difficult financial transitions. She's wearing the same style of conservative navy blazer she always wears, and her reading glasses hang from a beaded chain around her neck. Maggie, she says warmly, extending her hand. I was so sorry to hear about Bobby's passing. He was such a lovely man. Thank you, Janet. That means a lot. I assume you're here to access your box? Yes, and I also need to update the access records. I want to document everything that's currently stored there, and I may need to make some additions or changes to the contents. Janet nods and leads me through the security door toward the vault area. The hallway beyond is lined with motivational posters about financial planning and retirement security, and the fluorescent lighting gives everything a slightly greenish tint that makes me think of old hospital corridors. Has anyone else inquired about accessing this box? I ask as we walk. No, but we did receive a call yesterday from someone claiming to be your stepson asking about the account. Of course, we can't provide any information to anyone not listed as an authorized user. My stomach tightens, but I'm not surprised. Derek is nothing if not predictable in his desperation to control every aspect of the situation. What exactly did he want to know? He asked whether there were any other accounts or services associated with your name, and whether there were any safety deposit boxes registered to Robert Chen's estate. I told him we couldn't discuss customer information with unauthorized parties, and suggested he contact you directly if he had questions. We reach the vault area, where Janet retrieves her master key and leads me to the wall of safety deposit boxes. Box 1847 sits in the middle section, its bronze face gleaming under the overhead lights. Janet inserts her key into the left side of the dual lock system, while I insert mine into the right side, and together we turn them until the mechanism clicks open. The box slides out smoothly, heavier than it looks due to the weight of its contents. Janet carries it to the private viewing room, a small windowless space furnished with a single table, 2 chairs, and a lamp with a flexible neck designed for examining documents or valuables. The walls are painted in institutional beige, and the only decoration is a framed photograph of downtown Riverside from the 1940s, when the bank first opened. Take as much time as you need, Janet says, closing the door behind her. Just press the call button when you're ready to return the box. Alone in the quiet room, I lift the lid of the safety deposit box and feel my breath catch in my throat. Even though I helped Bobby arrange these contents 6 months ago, seeing them again brings back a flood of memories and emotions that I wasn't quite prepared for. Each item tells a story, represents a decision, carries the weight of Bobby's lifetime of work and love. The largest items are 3 black velvet jewelry cases, each containing pieces that Bobby considered too precious for the store's safes. I open the first case and find myself looking at the platinum necklace with natural pearls that belonged to Bobby's grandmother, the one she wore in her wedding photograph that still hangs in our bedroom. The pearls have a lustrous quality that only comes from decades of careful wear, and the platinum setting shows the intricate filigree work that was popular in the 1920s. The second case holds the sapphire earrings Bobby designed for me but never gave me. The stones are perfectly matched Ceylon sapphires, each surrounded by a halo of tiny diamonds set in white gold. I can see Bobby's careful attention to detail in every aspect of the design, from the proportions of the stones to the delicate millgrain work around each diamond. He spent months sketching different variations of these earrings, never quite satisfied with any design, until he found this one. The third case contains what Bobby always called his masterpiece, a ruby and diamond ring he created for a customer who commissioned it for his wife's 60th birthday. The customer died in a car accident before he could pick up the ring, and his widow couldn't afford to complete the purchase. Rather than break apart the setting, Bobby kept the ring as an example of his finest work. The ruby is a 3-carat Burmese stone with exceptional clarity and color, surrounded by perfectly matched round diamonds in a setting that took Bobby 6 weeks to complete. Beyond the jewelry cases, the safety deposit box contains several smaller pouches filled with loose stones. These are Bobby's investment pieces, stones he acquired over the years whenever he found exceptional quality at favorable prices. There are diamonds ranging from 0.5 carat to 3 carats, emeralds from Colombia and Zambia, sapphires from Ceylon and Australia, and a small collection of rare colored diamonds that Bobby purchased from an estate sale in Los Angeles 3 years ago. Each pouch is labeled in Bobby's careful handwriting with the stone's specifications, purchase date, and acquisition cost. As I examine the labels, I'm struck by Bobby's methodical approach to building this collection. These weren't impulse purchases or stones he bought simply because they were available. Each acquisition was carefully considered, researched, and documented. Bobby was building a treasure trove of exceptional stones that would retain their value regardless of market fluctuations or changes in fashion. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper, are the business documents that Bobby considered too important to keep at home or in the store offices. There's a thick folder labeled Insurance Documentation, Private Policies, containing certificates and policy summaries for the additional coverage Bobby maintained on high-value store inventory. Another folder contains copies of supplier agreements dating back 15 years, including exclusive arrangements and special pricing structures that Derek has been systematically dismantling. The most significant folder is labeled Business Valuations and Assessments, and it contains documentation that Derek has never seen. Inside are professional appraisals of each store location, including the value of long-term customer relationships, supplier arrangements, and brand recognition in the local market. Bobby commissioned these appraisals 2 years ago when he first started worrying about Derek's plans for the business. According to these documents, the true value of Chen's fine jewelry extends far beyond the physical assets and inventory that Derek inherited. The established customer relationships alone are valued at over $200,000, based on average customer lifetime value and repeat business patterns. The supplier relationships add another $150,000 in value through preferential pricing, exclusive access to exceptional stones, and favorable payment terms. Most importantly, the appraisals document the value of the Chen's fine jewelry brand and reputation in the Riverside market. After 46 years of operation, Bobby had built something that couldn't be easily replicated or replaced. Customers trusted the Chen name because they knew Bobby personally, because they'd done business with him for decades, because they associated the stores with quality, integrity, and fair pricing. Derek sees the business as 3 retail locations selling jewelry. The appraisals reveal that Derek actually inherited a complex ecosystem of relationships, reputation, and specialized knowledge that took Bobby nearly 5 decades to build. I spend the next 2 hours photographing every item in the safety deposit box, documenting the contents with the same methodical precision Bobby would have used. Each piece of jewelry is photographed from multiple angles, with close-up shots of any maker's marks, signatures, or distinguishing characteristics. The loose stones are photographed individually and in groups, with careful attention to color, clarity, and cut quality that will be evident even in digital images. The business documents require even more careful documentation. I photograph each page of the insurance policies, making sure the policy numbers, coverage amounts, and beneficiary information are clearly visible. The supplier agreements receive the same treatment, with particular attention to the exclusivity clauses and pricing structures that Derek has been unknowingly abandoning. As I work, I can't help but think about the conversation I had with Frank yesterday evening. He asked me what I hoped to accomplish by documenting everything so thoroughly, and I told him it was about creating an undeniable record of what Bobby actually left behind. Not just the physical assets that appeared in his will, but the complete picture of what he built and what he intended to preserve. Derek thinks he inherited a jewelry business. What he actually inherited was the responsibility for protecting 46 years of relationships, commitments, and careful planning. The safety deposit box contains the evidence of that responsibility, along with the tools Bobby provided to fulfill it properly. By 10:30, I've completed my documentation and carefully returned each item to its proper place in the safety deposit box. The photographs are stored on my phone and backed up to the cloud storage account Frank helped me set up last week. The most sensitive documents are also scanned and stored in encrypted files that Derek won't be able to access even if he somehow gains control of my other accounts. Janet returns to help me secure the box and return it to its slot in the vault wall. As we walk back toward the lobby, she mentions that the bank has received several inquiries about safety deposit box rentals in recent weeks, mostly from older customers who are concerned about protecting valuable items during family transitions. It's become quite common, she says. Adult children who assume they understand their parents' financial situations often discover there were arrangements they knew nothing about. Your situation with Bobby was actually quite typical in that regard. What do you mean? Well, couples who've been married for decades often have informal arrangements about who manages what aspects of their finances. The surviving spouse usually knows far more about the overall financial picture than the adult children realize. But the children often assume they should be making decisions about their parents' affairs, especially if there's been a health crisis or cognitive decline. We stop at the lobby desk where Janet processes the access record for my visit. I sign the logbook and accept a printed receipt showing the date and time of my access, documentation that might become important if Derek continues to push for information about the safety deposit box. Has Derek called again? I ask. Not directly, but we did receive a call from an attorney's office yesterday afternoon, asking similar questions about accounts associated with Robert Chen's estate. Again, we couldn't provide any information to unauthorized parties. This doesn't surprise me, but it does confirm that Derek is escalating his efforts to locate any assets he might have overlooked. The attorney was probably the same firm handling the estate probate, fishing for information about accounts or assets that weren't listed in Bobby's will. Janet, I want to make sure I understand the legal situation clearly. As the surviving account holder on this safety deposit box, what are my rights and obligations? The contents of the box belong entirely to you since you were listed as a joint holder with survivorship rights. No one else can access the box or make claims on its contents unless you specifically authorize them to do so. Even if someone obtained a court order related to estate proceedings, they couldn't access this box because it was never part of the estate. And if someone tried to claim that Bobby lacked capacity when we set up the box, we have detailed records of your initial visit, including my notes about Bobby's mental state and decision-making capacity. He was clearly competent and engaged during the entire process. He asked detailed questions about the security procedures, read all the documentation carefully, and made specific decisions about how he wanted the box set up. If anyone questioned his capacity, we would have contemporary records to contradict those claims. This is exactly what I hoped to hear. Bobby anticipated that Derek might try to challenge any arrangements that excluded him from complete control over Bobby's assets. By setting up the safety deposit box as a joint account with survivorship rights, Bobby ensured that its contents would pass directly to me without going through probate or estate proceedings. I drive home from the bank feeling more confident about my position but also more aware of the scope of the conflict ahead. Derek isn't just trying to sell the house and liquidate Bobby's assets. He's conducting a systematic investigation to locate and claim anything of value that might have escaped his notice. The phone calls to the bank, the attorney inquiries, the rushed timeline for selling the house. All of it points to someone who's determined to extract maximum value from Bobby's estate as quickly as possible. The house on Maple Street feels different when I return from the bank, as if the knowledge of what's stored in that safety deposit box has somehow changed the balance of power within these walls. I walk through the rooms slowly, noting details I want to preserve in my memory before Derek's appraisers and potential buyers start tramping through with their measuring tapes and market assessments. In Bobby's workshop, I sit at his desk and spread out the printed photographs from the safety deposit box. Seeing the images on paper makes the contents feel more real, more substantial than the digital files stored on my phone. These aren't just valuable objects. They're the physical manifestation of Bobby's lifetime of work, learning, and careful decision-making. The sapphire earrings in particular catch my attention. In the photograph, I can see every detail of Bobby's design work, every carefully placed diamond in the surrounding halos. He never told me why he never gave them to me, but looking at them now, I think I understand. Bobby was waiting for the right moment. The perfect occasion when presenting them would mean more than just giving me expensive jewelry. Perhaps he intended them for our 40th anniversary, still 8 years away when he was diagnosed. Perhaps he was saving them for the day he retired, and we could finally travel together without worrying about the stores. Or perhaps he simply wanted to keep something beautiful and precious in reserve, knowing that someday I would need tangible proof of his love and faith in me. The business documents tell a different kind of story, one about responsibility and legacy, rather than romance and sentiment. Bobby spent months preparing these files, gathering documentation that would tell the complete story of what he built and how he built it. He knew Derek would focus on the obvious assets, the store locations, the visible inventory, the customer lists. But Bobby also knew that the real value of the business lay in subtler elements that Derek might not recognize or appreciate. The supplier relationships alone represent decades of careful cultivation. Bobby didn't just buy stones from dealers. He built personal relationships with miners, cutters, and wholesalers around the world. He attended trade shows not just to buy inventory, but to maintain connections. To be among the first to see exceptional stones. To earn the trust that comes with decades of honest dealing and prompt payment. Derek sees these relationships as vendor arrangements that can be optimized for better pricing or more favorable terms. Bobby understood them as partnerships built on mutual respect and shared commitment to quality. The documentation in the safety deposit box includes letters from suppliers expressing concern about the changes Derek has been implementing, along with Bobby's responses attempting to reassure them that the business would continue to honor its commitments. Some of these letters make for painful reading. Raj Patel, who has been supplying Bobby with emeralds from his family's mines in Colombia for 23 years, wrote to express confusion about Derek's demands for lower prices and shorter payment terms. Bobby's response, dictated to me during one of his good days last winter, tried to explain that Derek was still learning the business and that the long-term relationships would be preserved. But Bobby knew, even as he dictated that letter, that Derek had no intention of preserving relationships he saw as inefficient or unnecessarily sentimental. The documentation includes copies of Derek's correspondence with new suppliers, negotiations that prioritize price over quality, and treat each transaction as a separate deal rather than part of an ongoing partnership. The phone rings just as I'm finishing my review of the supplier correspondence, and the caller ID shows Derek's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering, long enough to compose myself and decide how much I'm willing to reveal about my morning at the bank. Hello, Derek. Maggie, we need to talk. I got a call from the bank saying you were asking questions about Dad's accounts. I accessed my safety deposit box this morning, if that's what you're referring to. It's a service I pay for, and I'm entitled to use it. What safety deposit box? Dad never mentioned any safety deposit box. Your father and I opened it 6 months ago. We felt it was important to have secure storage for certain valuable items. There's a long pause, and I can almost hear Derek's mind racing through the implications. When he speaks again, his voice has lost its earlier confidence and taken on an edge of barely controlled frustration. What kind of valuable items? Personal items. Family heirlooms. Documentation. The kinds of things you keep safe for future generations. Maggie, if there are business assets or inventory that should have been included in the estate evaluation, there are no business assets in my safety deposit box, Derek. Everything your father left to you in his will is exactly what you received. The safety deposit box contains items that belong to me, items that your father wanted me to have. I think we should meet and discuss this in person. I think that's a very good idea. When would you like to meet? This afternoon? I can be at the house by 2 o'clock. Actually, Derek, I'd prefer to meet somewhere neutral. How about Sunny's Diner on Route 91? 3 o'clock. Another pause, shorter this time but loaded with tension. Derek clearly expected me to agree to meet at the house, where he could control the environment and perhaps bring reinforcements in the form of Vanessa or his attorney. Fine. 3 o'clock at the diner. I'll see you then. I hang up the phone and immediately call Frank to let him know about the meeting. He offers to accompany me, but I decline. This first confrontation needs to be between Derek and me alone, without the complications that Frank's presence might introduce. Derek needs to understand that he's dealing with me directly, not with some coalition of Bobby's friends and allies. The next few hours pass slowly as I prepare for the meeting. I select the documents and photographs I want to share with Derek, choosing carefully to provide enough information to demonstrate that I'm not bluffing, while keeping my strongest evidence in reserve for later use. The goal is to shift Derek's understanding of the situation without revealing the full scope of what Bobby and I prepared. I also spend time thinking about what I want to accomplish in this meeting beyond just shocking Derek with the revelation that I'm not as helpless as he assumed. Derek is Bobby's son, and despite everything that's happened, I still hope there's a possibility for some kind of reconciliation that would honor Bobby's memory and preserve what he built. But I also know that Derek has spent the last 2 years demonstrating exactly who he is and what he values. The Derek who pressured Bobby to change his will, who moved into our house uninvited, who began dismantling business relationships before Bobby was even gone. That Derek isn't likely to suddenly develop respect for other people's feelings or rights. The meeting at Sunny's Diner will tell me which Derek I'm really dealing with. The son who might still be reachable through appeals to family loyalty and his father's legacy, or the predator who sees Bobby's death as an opportunity to eliminate obstacles and maximize profit. Either way, Derek is about to learn that the woman he's been dismissing as a confused old widow spent 6 months learning everything Bobby could teach her about protecting what matters most. And if Derek chooses to continue treating me as an enemy rather than family, he's going to discover just how much Bobby taught me about fighting back. Derek arrives at Sunny's Diner 10 minutes late, which doesn't surprise me given his tendency to use tardiness as a power play. Through the window, I watch him park his black BMW in the spot closest to the entrance, taking up enough space that the car next to him will have trouble opening their doors. He sits in the driver's seat for a moment, probably checking his phone or psyching himself up for what he clearly expects to be a difficult conversation. When he finally enters the diner, Derek scans the room until he spots me in the corner booth, the same one where Frank and I sat yesterday afternoon. He's dressed in what I've come to recognize as his intimidation outfit, a dark gray suit that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent, Italian leather shoes that click authoritatively on the linoleum floor, and a watch that catches the light as he gestures. Everything about his appearance is designed to remind people that he's successful, important, and not to be trifled with. Dolores approaches him with a menu, but Derek waves her away with the kind of dismissive gesture that makes me embarrassed to share a family name with him. He slides into the booth across from me without any greeting or acknowledgement of his lateness, his eyes immediately focusing on the manila folder I've placed on the table between us. "Let's make this quick," he says, his voice carrying that familiar edge of impatience that suggests he has more important places to be. "I've got a conference call with investors at 4. "Of course you do," I reply, keeping my tone neutral. "Would you like some coffee?" Dolores makes it fresh every hour. "I didn't come here for coffee, Maggie. I came here because you're apparently sitting on assets that should have been disclosed during the estate proceedings." Derek's directness doesn't surprise me, but his complete lack of social courtesy still stings. This is Bobby's son, the child Bobby raised and supported and worried about for 45 years. The child who called me his stepmother at family gatherings when it was convenient and treated me like hired help when it wasn't. "I'm not sitting on anything, Derek. The safety deposit box I accessed this morning contains my personal property. Items that your father wanted me to have." "Show me." I open the manila folder and slide the first photograph across the table. It shows the contents of the safety deposit box laid out on the bank's viewing table, with each item clearly visible and identifiable. Derek's eyes widen as he takes in the scope of what he's looking at, and I can see him doing rapid mental calculations about the potential value of the jewelry and loose stones. Jesus Christ, he breathes. How much is all this worth? It's worth whatever it's worth, Derek. That's not really the point. The hell it isn't the point. If Dad had hundreds of thousands of dollars in jewelry and gemstones, that should have been part of the estate evaluation. This could change the entire distribution of assets. I slide the second photograph across the table, this one showing the business documents Bobby stored in the safety deposit box. Derek barely glances at it, his attention still focused on the jewelry inventory. These are the documents your father considered too important to leave in the house or the store offices, I explain. Insurance policies, supplier agreements, business valuations. Things he wanted to make sure would be preserved regardless of what happened to the physical locations. I don't care about paperwork, Maggie. I care about assets. If Dad was hiding valuable inventory in a safety deposit box, that's fraudulent concealment of estate assets. Your father wasn't hiding anything, Derek. He was protecting things he valued. There's a difference. Not legally, there isn't. If these items were purchased with business funds, or were originally store inventory, they belong to the estate, not to you personally. Derek's response tells me everything I need to know about how this conversation is going to proceed. He's not interested in understanding Bobby's motivations or honoring his intentions. He's interested in identifying assets he can claim and control. The son who might have been reachable through appeals to family loyalty clearly isn't the Derek sitting across from me. Let me ask you something, I say, pulling out my phone and scrolling to the photos I took at the bank. Do you recognize this? The image on my screen shows the sapphire earrings Bobby designed for me. The ones he spent months perfecting, but never gave me. Even in the flat lighting of the bank's viewing room, the stones glow with an inner fire that speaks to their exceptional quality and Bobby's skill as a designer. Derek glances at the screen and shrugs. They're sapphire earrings, so what? Your father designed and created these earrings specifically for me. He bought the stones with his own money, not store funds. He did the design work in his personal shop at home, not at any of the business locations. He intended them as a gift for a special occasion that never came. Can you prove that? I show him the next photo, this one displaying Bobby's design sketches for the earrings alongside his notes about stone selection and setting specifications. Bobby's handwriting is clearly visible, along with dates that span several months of development work. Your father documented everything, Derek. Every stone purchase, every design decision, every hour of work. These earrings represent his personal artistry and his personal investment. They were never store merchandise. That doesn't matter. If Dad was supposed to be working on store business, and instead was creating personal jewelry projects, that's a misuse of company time and resources. The callousness of this response hits me like a physical blow. Derek is suggesting that Bobby's expression of love for me, his artistic development, his personal creative work, was somehow theft from the business, that the hours Bobby spent in his workshop designing something beautiful for his wife were hours stolen from Derek's inheritance. Your father built that business from nothing, I say, struggling to keep my voice steady. He worked 60-hour weeks for 46 years. He earned the right to spend his own time and money on personal projects. Not if it affected the profitability of the business, and not if it involved concealing valuable assets from the estate. I close my phone and slide it back into my purse. This conversation is going exactly where I expected it to go, but experiencing Derek's complete lack of empathy or understanding still hurts in ways I didn't fully anticipate. Derek, let me be very clear about something. The contents of that safety deposit box belong to me. Your father and I opened it as joint account holders with survivorship rights. The bank has documentation of his mental capacity and his clear intent to share ownership of those contents with me. Nothing in that box was ever part of your father's estate. We'll see about that. I'm having my attorney look into the legal requirements for joint safety deposit box ownership. Good, do that. While you're at it, have your attorney explain what those business documents in the safety deposit box reveal about the changes you've been making to your father's business practices. For the first time since arriving at the diner, Derek looks uncertain. He's been so focused on the jewelry and gemstones that he's barely acknowledged the business documentation I mentioned. What are you talking about? I open the folder again and pull out copies of several documents I photographed this morning. The first is a letter from Raj Patel, Bobby's longtime emerald supplier, expressing concern about Derek's demands for lower prices and shorter payment terms. The second is a copy of Derek's response to a different supplier, canceling a 20-year exclusive agreement in favor of a new vendor offering cheaper stones. Your father maintained detailed records of all his supplier relationships, I explain. He also documented the changes you've been making since you took over the business operations. Some of these changes have been quite expensive. Derek scans the documents quickly, his expression growing more defensive with each page. I'm modernizing the business. Dad was too sentimental about vendor relationships. These new arrangements are more cost-effective. Are they? Because according to the business valuation your father commissioned, the supplier relationships you've been destroying were worth over $150,000 in preferential pricing and exclusive access to exceptional stones. That's ridiculous. Vendor relationships don't have quantifiable value. They do when you've spent decades building trust and loyalty with suppliers who give you first option on their best stones. They do when you have payment terms that allow you to take advantage of opportunities without immediate cash outlays. They do when your suppliers know your quality standards and send you stones that meet those standards instead of requiring you to sort through inferior merchandise. I pull out another document, this one showing a comparison between the stones Derek has been purchasing from his new suppliers versus the stones Bobby acquired from his established contacts. The difference in quality is stark, even to someone without Bobby's expertise. Your new suppliers are providing lower-grade stones at what appears to be better pricing, I continue. But when you factor in the additional labor required to sort through inferior merchandise, the higher return rates from customers who notice the quality difference, and the loss of repeat business from customers who associate Chen's fine jewelry with exceptional quality, your cost savings disappear. Derek's face is reddening, but whether from anger or embarrassment, I can't tell. You don't understand business, Maggie. You've never had to make real decisions about profitability and efficiency. You're right, I've never had to make those decisions. But I've spent 32 years watching your father make them. I've seen him turn down seemingly profitable opportunities because they would compromise the business's reputation. I've seen him maintain relationships with suppliers, even when it would have been easier to find cheaper alternatives. And I've seen the results of those decisions in the form of a business that generated consistent profits for 4 decades. The jewelry business has changed. Dad's old-fashioned approach wouldn't work in today's market. Really? Because according to the customer satisfaction surveys your father conducted last year, Chen's fine jewelry had a 96% customer satisfaction rate and an 87% repeat business rate. Those numbers suggest that your father's approach was working very well in today's market. Derek shifts uncomfortably in his seat, and I can see that he's beginning to understand the scope of what Bobby documented in those business files. The safety deposit box doesn't just contain valuable jewelry and gemstones. It contains a comprehensive record of how the business actually functioned versus how Derek thinks it should function. What do you want, Maggie? I want you to stop treating me like an obstacle to be removed. I want you to acknowledge that your father was a smart man who made careful decisions about his business and his personal life. And I want you to understand that the choices you make about the business will affect everyone who depended on your father's integrity and consistency. And in exchange? In exchange, I'm willing to work with you to understand what your father actually built. I'm willing to help you maintain the relationships that made the business successful. I'm willing to share the knowledge I gained from working alongside him for 3 decades. Derek leans back in the booth, his expression skeptical. You're offering to help me run the business? I'm offering to help you understand the business. There's a difference. What about the house? What about the 30-day timeline? That depends on you, Derek. If you're willing to treat me as family instead of as an enemy, we can work out arrangements that honor your father's memory and protect what he built. If you're determined to extract maximum value from his estate as quickly as possible, then we'll proceed according to the timeline you established. Derek pulls out his phone and checks the time. His conference call with investors is approaching, and I can see him trying to calculate how much time he has for this conversation. I need to think about this, he says finally. That's fine. Take all the time you need. But Derek, understand that the longer you wait, the more difficult it becomes to repair the damage you've already done to the business relationships. Some of these suppliers have been working with your father for decades. They're not going to wait indefinitely for you to decide whether you value their loyalty or just their lowest prices. Derek stands abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'll call you tomorrow. I'll be here, I reply. At the house your father left me, taking care of the garden he planted, and the workshop where he created beautiful things for the people he loved. Derek leaves the diner without another word, and I watch through the window as he sits in his BMW for several minutes, presumably making phone calls or sending text messages about what he's learned. The conference call with investors has probably been postponed, while Derek tries to understand the implications of what I've shown him. I order a piece of pie and a fresh cup of coffee from Dolores, who has been watching the entire interaction with the kind of professional discretion that comes from years of serving customers who bring their personal dramas to her tables. She doesn't ask questions, but she refills my coffee cup without being asked, and brings extra napkins, small gestures that suggest she understands I might need a few minutes to process what just happened. The confrontation with Derek went exactly as I expected, but that doesn't make it any less emotionally draining. For 32 years, I've hoped that Derek would eventually see me as more than just the woman who married his father. I've hoped that shared experiences and family milestones would eventually create genuine affection and respect between us. Today's conversation has finally convinced me that Derek is incapable of seeing me as anything other than an obstacle to his plans. The callousness with which he dismissed Bobby's artistic work, the greed with which he evaluated the jewelry in the safety deposit box, the complete lack of interest in understanding the business relationships Bobby spent decades building. All of it confirms that Derek values only what he can control and monetize. But the conversation also accomplished something important. Derek now understands that I'm not the confused, grief-stricken widow he thought he was dealing with. He knows that I have access to information and resources that could complicate his plans. He knows that the empty safe was never the real prize, and that Bobby's actual legacy is far more complex than what appeared in the will. Most importantly, Derek knows that I'm prepared to fight for what Bobby wanted to preserve. The safety deposit box isn't just a collection of valuable objects. It's a comprehensive record of Bobby's intentions, his values, his understanding of what made the business successful and what made our marriage meaningful. My phone buzzes with a text message from Lisa, my daughter who lives in Phoenix. We've been estranged for 5 years, ever since she sided with Derek during a family argument about Bobby's healthcare decisions. The message is brief. Heard about the will reading. Are you okay? I stare at the message for a long moment, surprised by the flood of emotions it brings up. Lisa chose Derek's side because she believed his version of events, his claims that I was manipulating Bobby and isolating him from his family. She never asked for my side of the story, never questioned whether Derek's accusations might be motivated by something other than genuine concern for his father. I type a response. I'm fine, taking care of myself and the house. Your stepfather left me well provided for. The response comes quickly. Derek says there might be assets that weren't properly disclosed. So Derek is already reaching out to family members, trying to build support for his position. I'm not surprised, but I am disappointed that Lisa is apparently willing to participate in Derek's campaign against me. Derek is mistaken about many things, I text back. Your stepfather was very careful about his legal and financial arrangements. Can we talk? I consider this request carefully. Lisa cut off contact with me 5 years ago, and her sudden interest in reconciliation comes at a suspiciously convenient time. She might be genuinely concerned about my welfare, or she might be gathering information for Derek. I'd be happy to talk with you, but not about financial matters. If you're interested in having a relationship with me, that's wonderful. If you're calling to ask about inheritance issues, you should talk to Derek directly. The response takes longer this time. I'm not calling about money. I'm calling because I realized I don't actually know what happened between you and Derek, and maybe I should have asked before choosing sides. This is more than I expected from Lisa, and certainly more than I hoped for. The possibility that she might be willing to hear my side of the story, to question the narrative Derek has been promoting, feels like a gift I don't deserve. I would love to talk with you, I text back, whenever you're ready. Tomorrow evening, I could drive over from Phoenix. I'll be here. I finish my pie and coffee while watching the afternoon traffic build on Route 91. Commuters heading home from their jobs in Los Angeles, families picking up children from school, elderly couples running errands before dinner. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that in a vinyl booth at Sonny's Diner, a 68-year-old widow has just fired the opening shots in a battle for her dead husband's legacy. The drive home takes longer than usual due to construction on University Avenue, giving me time to think about what comes next. Derek will consult with his attorney about the safety deposit box, and he'll probably discover that my legal position is stronger than he hoped. He'll also start calling suppliers and customers to try to understand the business relationships I mentioned, and he'll likely discover that his changes have been more disruptive than he realized. Most importantly, Derek will have to decide whether he's willing to acknowledge that Bobby might have been smarter than Derek gave him credit for. Whether he's willing to admit that the business practices he's been dismissing as sentimental and old-fashioned were actually carefully developed systems that supported the company's long-term success. The house on Maple Street welcomes me with its familiar warmth and the scent of the jasmine Bobby planted along the front walkway. Inside, Bobby's workshop waits exactly as he left it, with his tools arranged on the pegboard and his unfinished projects still laid out on the workbench. The jeweler's loop sits on its green felt pad, ready for the next stone that will never come. I sit at Bobby's desk and open the folder containing the photographs from the safety deposit box. The images seem different now that I've shown them to Derek, somehow more significant and more vulnerable. Derek's reaction to the jewelry was exactly what I expected, but seeing his greed and calculation up close was still painful. The sapphire earrings deserve better than Derek's dismissive evaluation. They deserve to be understood as expressions of love, as demonstrations of artistic skill, as tangible proof that Bobby valued beauty and craftsmanship over mere monetary worth. They deserve to be worn by someone who understands their significance, not liquidated by someone who sees them only as assets to be converted to cash. My phone rings, and Frank's name appears on the caller ID. He's probably calling to check on how the meeting with Derek went, to offer support or advice for whatever comes next. How did it go? He asks without preamble, exactly as expected. Derek is interested in the value of the jewelry, and completely uninterested in understanding why Bobby wanted me to have it. And the business documents? He barely looked at them until I explained what they contained. Then he got defensive about the changes he's been making. Is he willing to work with you? I offered to help him understand the business, and he said he'd think about it. But Frank, I don't think Derek is capable of seeing me as anything other than an obstacle. He's too invested in his narrative about Bobby's declining mental capacity and my supposed manipulation. What's your next move? Lisa is driving over from Phoenix tomorrow evening. She wants to talk, and she says she's ready to hear my side of the story. That's significant. It could be. Or it could be Derek's attempt to gather information through a family member I might trust more than I trust him. Either way, it's an opportunity. Maybe. Frank, I need to ask you something. If Derek continues to push for control over the safety deposit box contents, how much legal trouble am I looking at? None, as long as you can demonstrate that Bobby was competent when you opened the joint account and that the contents were legitimately acquired. The bank has records of your initial visit, and you have documentation of Bobby's mental state from his doctors at that time. And if Derek tries to claim that the jewelry was originally store inventory, then you'll need to prove that the stones were purchased with personal funds, and that the finished pieces were created for personal use. From what you've shown me, Bobby documented everything thoroughly. What about the business documents? Derek seems to think those should be part of the estate. Business documents that were created for Bobby's personal use and stored in his personal safety deposit box belong to whoever he chose to share them with. Derek inherited the business, but he didn't inherit Bobby's personal records about how he chose to operate that business. This is what I needed to hear. Bobby's preparations were as thorough as I hoped, and my legal position is as strong as I believed. Derek can consult with attorneys and threaten legal action, but the safety deposit box and its contents are mine to control. The evening passes quietly as I prepare for Lisa's visit tomorrow. I clean the guest room she used during her childhood visits, stock the refrigerator with food she used to enjoy, and try to remember the young woman she was before Derek's influence changed her perception of our family dynamics. Lisa was 15 when I married Bobby, old enough to have clear memories of her mother and strong opinions about her father's new wife. She was never hostile, but she was never warm either. She treated me with the kind of polite distance that suggested she was waiting for me to prove myself worthy of her respect. I thought I had earned that respect over the years, through birthday gifts and graduation celebrations, through Christmas mornings and family vacations. But when Derek began his campaign to discredit me during Bobby's illness, Lisa chose to believe Derek's version of events rather than defend the relationship we'd built. Tomorrow will tell me whether Lisa is ready to reconsider that choice, whether she's willing to acknowledge that Derek might have been motivated by self-interest, rather than genuine concern for his father's welfare. As I prepare for bed, I think about Bobby's sapphire earrings waiting in the safety deposit box, about the business relationships Derek is destroying, about the 30-day timeline for selling the house. All of it depends on Derek's decision about how he wants to proceed, about whether he's willing to acknowledge that Bobby might have been wiser than his son assumed. But regardless of Derek's choice, I'm prepared for whatever comes next. The safety deposit box contains more than jewelry and documentation. It contains Bobby's faith in my ability to protect what he valued most, his trust in my judgment, his belief that I would honor his memory by fighting for what he wanted to preserve. Derek wanted 30 days to clear me out of the house and move on with his plans. Instead, he's getting 30 days to discover that the woman he's been dismissing as a confused old widow actually learned everything Bobby could teach her about the difference between having power and knowing how to use it. The empty safe was never the real treasure. It was just the beginning of a much larger lesson about what happens when you underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for. Lisa arrives at my door carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the uncertain expression of someone who isn't sure what kind of reception she'll receive. She looks older than I remember, her dark hair now streaked with premature gray and her face showing the kind of stress lines that come from working too many hours at a job that demands everything and gives little back. She's dressed casually in jeans and a cotton sweater, a deliberate choice that suggests she wants this visit to feel personal rather than formal. We stand in the doorway for a moment, neither of us quite sure how to bridge 5 years of silence and hurt feelings. Lisa was always more reserved than Derek, more thoughtful in her judgments, but also more stubborn once she made up her mind. When she decided I was the villain in Bobby's story, she committed to that position completely, cutting off all contact and refusing to acknowledge my attempts at reconciliation. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she says finally, holding out the wine bottle like a peace offering. "I know I don't deserve your hospitality after the way I handled things." "You're always welcome here, Lisa. This was your home too for a while." I invite her inside and she follows me through the familiar hallways, her eyes taking in details that have changed since her last visit 5 years ago. Bobby's reading chair still sits by the living room window, but now it holds a stack of books I've been meaning to read instead of the financial journals he used to study every evening. The family photographs on the mantle have been rearranged to include more pictures of Bobby and me together, images from trips and anniversaries that celebrate our life as a couple rather than just documenting family gatherings. We settle in the kitchen, where I've prepared a simple dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables from Bobby's garden. Lisa comments on how good everything looks, how the house still feels warm and welcoming, how she'd forgotten the way the evening light filters through the windows and creates patterns on the tile floor. Small talk that helps us both adjust to being in the same room again after so much time and distance. "I keep expecting to see Bobby come around the corner," Lisa says as we sit down to eat. "He always loved showing off his garden to visitors, pointing out which tomatoes were ready to pick, or explaining his system for training the grapevines. He would have been so happy to see you here again. He missed you terribly after we stopped hearing from you." Lisa's eyes fill with tears, and she sets down her fork with shaking hands. "I know. And I regret that more than I can express. I was angry and confused, and I let Derek convince me that you were somehow responsible for the tension in the family." "What changed your mind?" "Time, mostly. Distance from the immediate emotions of Bobby's illness. And honestly, watching Derek's behavior since the will reading has made me question everything he told me about the situation. This is the opening I've been hoping for. The acknowledgement that Derek's actions might not align with his stated motivations. But I know I need to be careful not to push too hard. Not to sound like I'm trying to turn Lisa against her stepbrother. What kind of behavior? The way he talked about clearing you out of the house so quickly. The way he referred to you as an occupancy issue when he was discussing the property sale with his investors. The complete lack of respect for your grief, or your right to mourn Bobby in the place where you built your life together. Lisa pauses, clearly struggling with emotions she's been suppressing for months. And then yesterday, when he called me about the safety deposit box, he was so focused on the potential value of what you might have that he never once asked how you were doing or whether you needed any support during this difficult time. Derek sees everything in terms of assets and obstacles. People are either useful to his plans or impediments to his goals. But it wasn't always like that, was it? I remember Derek being more considerate when we were younger, more interested in family relationships, and less obsessed with financial optimization. This is a difficult question because the honest answer might sound like I'm attacking Derek's character, rather than describing how he's changed over the years. But Lisa seems genuinely interested in understanding the evolution of family dynamics, not just confirming her existing assumptions. Derek started changing when he began working in real estate development, I tell her carefully. That business rewards people who can look at properties and neighborhoods and see only their potential for profitable transformation. Derek got very good at evaluating everything in terms of its highest and best use, its capacity for generating returns. And that perspective started affecting how he looked at family relationships? I think so. Derek began to see Bobby's business practices as inefficient, sentimental, not optimized for maximum profitability. He saw my influence on Bobby as an obstacle to necessary modernization. He saw the house as an undervalued asset that could generate better returns if it was sold to investors rather than used as a residence. Lisa nods slowly, processing this explanation against her own memories of Derek's evolution over recent years. He used to talk about Dad's business with respect, even admiration. But lately, whenever it comes up in conversation, he talks about it like it was some antiquated operation that needed to be brought into the modern era. Your stepfather built something remarkable, Lisa. Not just financially successful, but personally meaningful. His customers trusted him completely. His suppliers considered him family. His employees stayed with him for decades because they knew he valued their contributions. And Derek doesn't see the value in those relationships? Derek sees inefficiencies. Long-term supplier relationships that might prevent him from negotiating better prices elsewhere. Customer service standards that require more time and attention than strictly necessary. Employee benefits and loyalty programs that reduce short-term profitability. We eat in comfortable silence for a while, both of us thinking about the implications of Derek's approach to business and family relationships. Lisa asks for seconds on the roasted vegetables, complimenting my cooking and mentioning that she'd forgotten how much she enjoyed family dinners at this kitchen table. Can you tell me about the safety deposit box? She asks eventually. Derek made it sound like you were hiding assets that should have been part of the estate settlement. I explain the circumstances that led Bobby and me to open the safety deposit box 6 months before his death, his concerns about Derek's plans for the business, his desire to preserve certain items that held special significance beyond their monetary value. I described the process of moving selected jewelry pieces and important documents to secure storage, Bobby's careful documentation of everything we deposited, his clear intent to share ownership of the contents with me. So the empty safe in Bobby's study was never meant to be your inheritance? The empty safe was Bobby's way of making a point. He knew Derek would interpret it as a final insult, evidence that Bobby had lost respect for me, or decided I didn't deserve anything of value. Bobby wanted Derek to experience that moment of cruel satisfaction, that feeling of victory over the woman he saw as an obstacle. Because he knew you had access to something much more significant? Because he knew that Derek's assumptions about my helplessness and confusion were completely wrong. Bobby spent 6 months teaching me everything I needed to know about protecting what mattered to him. The empty safe was just the setup for a larger lesson. Lisa smiles for the first time since arriving, an expression of genuine admiration mixed with affection. That sounds exactly like something Bobby would do. He always loved those moments when someone underestimated him and he got to prove them wrong. Your stepfather was the smartest man I ever knew, and also the most patient. He could have confronted Derek directly about the damage his, quote, improvements were causing to the business. Instead, he documented everything carefully and left me with the tools to address the problems after his death. What kind of problems? I show Lisa some of the supplier correspondence I photographed at the bank, the letters expressing concern about Derek's new policies and the impact on long-term business relationships. I explained the insurance situation, Derek's decision to reduce coverage on store inventory without understanding the potential consequences. I described the customer satisfaction issues that are beginning to emerge as Derek's cost-cutting measures affect service quality. Derek thinks he's modernizing the business, but he's actually destroying the foundation Bobby spent decades building. And Bobby knew this would happen? Bobby hoped Derek would learn to appreciate what he'd inherited before making dramatic changes. But when it became clear that Derek was determined to optimize everything immediately, Bobby decided to preserve evidence of what the business looked like before Derek's improvements. Lisa studies the documents with the careful attention of someone who works in corporate finance and understands the implications of changing vendor relationships and insurance coverage. Her questions are intelligent and specific, focusing on the quantifiable impact of Derek's decisions rather than just the emotional significance of disrupted relationships. These supplier agreements Derek canceled, she says, pointing to one of the letters. They included exclusivity clauses that gave Bobby first option on exceptional stones, among other benefits. Some of Bobby's suppliers would call him personally when they acquired something special, before offering it to other dealers. Derek sees that as inefficient favoritism, rather than a competitive advantage. But if Bobby had access to better stones at better prices because of these relationships, then Derek's new suppliers might offer lower base prices, but they can't match the quality or the opportunity for exceptional pieces. Bobby's customers came to Chen's Fine Jewelry because they knew they'd find stones and settings they couldn't get anywhere else. And Derek doesn't understand that differentiation is more valuable than cost savings. Derek understands spreadsheets and profit margins. He doesn't understand that some customers will pay premium prices for premium experiences, and that those relationships take decades to develop. We moved to the living room for coffee and the wine Lisa brought, settling into the comfortable chairs where Bobby and I used to spend our evenings reading and talking about our days. Lisa seems more relaxed now, more like the young woman I remember from before our estrangement began. I owe you an apology, she says suddenly. A real one, not just the polite acknowledgement I offered when I arrived. I should have asked for your side of the story before accepting Derek's version of events. I should have trusted my own observations about your relationship with Bobby instead of letting Derek convince me that you were manipulating him. You were protecting your stepfather the best way you knew how. I can't fault you for that, even if I was hurt by your decision to cut off contact. But I wasn't really protecting Bobby, was I? I was protecting my own assumptions about what his relationships should look like. I never liked the idea of him remarrying, and I let that prejudice color my judgment when Derek started making accusations. This admission means more to me than Lisa probably realizes. For 5 years, I've wondered whether I somehow failed to demonstrate my genuine love for Bobby, whether I gave Lisa reasons to doubt my motivations or my commitment to her stepfather's well-being. Bobby knew you loved him, I tell her. He also knew that accepting me as part of the family was difficult for you, especially given how close you were to your mother. He never expected you to see me as a replacement parent, just as someone who made him happy. And I couldn't even manage that much grace. You were young when I married your stepfather, and you're older now. People change. Perspectives evolve. What matters is that you're here now, asking questions and trying to understand what really happened. Lisa sets down her wine glass and looks directly at me with an expression of determination I remember from her teenage years, when she'd made up her mind about something important. What do you need from me? How can I help repair the damage Derek has caused? I don't need you to choose sides between Derek and me, but I would appreciate your support in preserving what Bobby built, both in terms of the business and in terms of family relationships. What does that look like practically? Derek is going to have to decide whether he wants to continue down his current path, or whether he's willing to acknowledge that Bobby's approach to business might have been more sophisticated than he realized. If Derek chooses to keep treating me as an enemy rather than as someone with valuable knowledge about the business, then the family relationships Bobby cared about will be permanently damaged. And if he's willing to work with you, then maybe we can preserve the parts of Bobby's legacy that can't be quantified on a balance sheet. The customer relationships, the supplier partnerships, the reputation for quality and integrity that took 46 years to build. Lisa nods thoughtfully. Derek called me this afternoon, after your meeting at the diner. He seemed shaken by whatever you showed him, less confident than he's been since Bobby's death. What did he tell you? He said you had access to more assets than he'd realized, and that you seemed to know more about the business operations than he'd expected. He asked me whether I thought you might be willing to sell him the contents of the safety deposit box. This doesn't surprise me, though Derek's willingness to involve Lisa in financial negotiations suggests he's more worried about his position than he wanted to admit during our conversation. What did you tell him? I told him that if he wanted to discuss business matters with you, he should do it directly, rather than trying to use family members as intermediaries. And I told him that maybe he should focus less on acquiring assets and more on understanding why Bobby made the choices he did. How did Derek respond to that? He got defensive and started explaining how Bobby's business practices were outdated and sentimental. But for the first time, he sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. We talk until well after 10 o'clock, covering years of family history and misunderstandings, addressing hurt feelings and missed opportunities for connection. Lisa asks about Bobby's final months, and I describe his clarity about what mattered to him, his concern for the business's future, his hope that Derek would eventually understand the value of what he'd inherited beyond its monetary worth. When Lisa finally prepares to leave, she hugs me with genuine warmth for the first time since she was a teenager. I'm glad I came, she says. I'm glad we had this conversation, and I'm sorry it took me so long to ask the questions I should have asked 5 years ago. You're always welcome here. This house holds too many good memories to let old disagreements overshadow them. After Lisa drives away, I sit in Bobby's workshop surrounded by his tools and unfinished projects, thinking about forgiveness and second chances. Lisa's visit represents more than just personal reconciliation. It demonstrates that people can change their minds when presented with new information, that family relationships can heal, even after years of separation. Derek will have to make his own choice about whether he's willing to reconsider his assumptions about Bobby's legacy and my role in protecting it. The safety deposit box gives me leverage in that negotiation, but leverage is only useful if the other party is willing to engage in good faith. The next morning brings a phone call from Derek's attorney, a man named William Hayes who handles estate and business law for several of Derek's real estate development clients. Hayes speaks with the measured precision of someone who bills by the hour and wants to establish his professional credentials early in the conversation. Mrs. Chen, I'm calling on behalf of Derek Chen regarding some questions about asset disclosure in Robert Chen's estate. What kind of questions? Derek has informed me that you recently accessed a safety deposit box that may contain assets that should have been included in the estate inventory. We'd like to arrange a meeting to discuss the contents of that box and ensure that all estate assets are properly accounted for. Mr. Hayes, the safety deposit box in question was opened as a joint account with survivorship rights. The contents belong to me as the surviving account holder, not to the estate. That may be true, but if the contents were originally purchased with business funds or were removed from business inventory, they might still be subject to estate claims regardless of how the account was structured. Hayes is clearly fishing for information about the jewelry and gemstones, hoping to find some legal basis for challenging my ownership. But his questions suggest that Derek hasn't provided him with complete information about the business documents in the safety deposit box. Mr. Hayes, I have complete documentation for every item in the safety deposit box, including purchase records, ownership history, and evidence of my husband's clear intent regarding their disposition. If Derek wants to challenge my ownership of these items, he's welcome to do so through appropriate legal channels. We're not necessarily challenging anything, Mrs. Chen. We're simply trying to ensure that the estate settlement is complete and accurate. The estate settlement is complete and accurate based on the assets your client inherited. The safety deposit box contains my personal property, items that my husband chose to share with me during his lifetime. There's a long pause, as Hayes presumably takes notes or consults with Derek, who is probably listening to the conversation on speakerphone. Mrs. Chen, would you be willing to provide an inventory of the safety deposit box contents, just to eliminate any potential concerns about asset concealment? I'd be happy to discuss that with Derek directly. But Mr. Hayes, I think it's important for your client to understand that the safety deposit box contains more than just valuable objects. It contains documentation that might be relevant to his management of the business he inherited. What kind of documentation? Business records, supplier agreements, insurance policies. The kinds of documents that might help Derek understand why his father made certain operational decisions. Another pause, longer this time. When Hayes speaks again, his tone has shifted from professional interrogation to genuine curiosity. Are you suggesting that these documents contain information that could affect the current business operations? I'm suggesting that Derek might benefit from understanding his father's complete approach to managing the business, not just the parts that appeared in the formal estate inventory. Would you be willing to share this information with Derek? I've already offered to help Derek understand the business. Whether he's interested in that assistance depends on whether he sees me as a resource or as an obstacle. Hayes promises to discuss my responses with Derek and call back within 24 hours. The conversation confirms that Derek is indeed worried about the legal implications of the safety deposit box, but it also suggests that he hasn't fully grasped the significance of the business documentation I mentioned during our meeting at the diner. The afternoon brings an unexpected visitor, Tom Bradley, Bobby's former business partner who sold his share of the company to Derek 2 months ago. Tom looks older than I remember, his face marked by the stress of watching Derek dismantle business practices he helped Bobby develop over 20 years of partnership. Maggie, I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. I've been wanting to talk to you since the will reading, but I wasn't sure it was my place. Of course it's your place, Tom. You were Bobby's partner and friend for 20 years. This house is always open to you. Tom accepts my offer of coffee, and we sit at the kitchen table where Bobby and I shared so many meals and conversations. Tom's hands shake slightly as he lifts his cup, and I notice that he's lost weight since Bobby's funeral. I made a mistake selling my share of the business to Derek, he says without preamble. I should have waited, should have found a way to maintain some influence over how the company operates. You needed to retire, Tom. You'd earned the right to step back and enjoy your grandchildren. But I abandoned everything Bobby and I built together. I left it in the hands of someone who doesn't understand what made the business successful. Tom describes the changes Derek has implemented since taking full control of the company operations. The canceled supplier relationships, the reduced insurance coverage, the elimination of customer service programs that Bobby considered essential to the company's reputation. Most concerning, Derek has begun pressuring longtime employees to accept reduced benefits and increased productivity targets. He's treating the business like it's some corporate chain operation instead of a family company built on personal relationships, Tom says. Yesterday, he told Maria Santos that her customer service approach was too time-intensive, that she needed to focus on completing transactions more efficiently, rather than spending time talking with customers about their special occasions. Maria has worked for Bobby for 15 years, and she's the person customers ask for when they want help selecting engagement rings or anniversary gifts. Her knowledge of customer preferences and family histories makes her invaluable for generating repeat business and referrals. Derek doesn't understand that Maria's conversations with customers are sales activities, not inefficiencies, I explain. When Maria spends 20 minutes helping a young man understand diamond quality grades, she's building a relationship that will bring him back for wedding bands, anniversary gifts, and eventually jewelry for his daughters. Exactly, but Derek sees 20 minutes of employee time that could have been used to process 3 quick transactions, instead of 1 comprehensive consultation. Tom pulls out his phone and shows me a text message Derek sent to all employees yesterday. Effective immediately, customer consultations should be limited to 15 minutes unless the customer is making a purchase over $500. We need to optimize our productivity metrics and reduce unnecessary labor costs. The message makes me sick to my stomach. Bobby never timed his consultations with customers because he understood that building trust and relationships couldn't be rushed. Some of his most valuable long-term customers started as young people with modest budgets who appreciated the time and attention he gave them when other jewelers dismissed them as not worth the effort. Tom, I have something that might interest you. Documentation that Bobby preserved about the business operations and the relationships Derek is destroying. I show Tom some of the photographs from the safety deposit box, particularly the supplier correspondence and the customer satisfaction surveys. Tom studies each document carefully, his expression growing more troubled with each page. Bobby saw this coming, Tom says finally. He knew Derek would try to optimize everything without understanding what he was optimizing away. And Bobby documented everything so there would be a record of what the business looked like before Derek's improvements. What are you going to do with this information? That depends on Derek. I've offered to help him understand what his father built, but I can't force him to listen. If he's determined to continue down his current path, then at least there will be documentation of what he chose to destroy. Tom nods slowly, understanding the implications. And if Derek won't listen to reason? Then the customers, suppliers, and employees Bobby cared about will have to decide for themselves whether they want to continue supporting a business that no longer operates according to the principles that originally earned their loyalty. We talk for another hour about Bobby's vision for the business, his relationships with longtime customers, his commitment to quality and integrity even when it meant accepting lower profit margins. Tom shares stories I haven't heard before about Bobby's generosity toward employees during difficult times, his willingness to extend credit to customers facing temporary financial hardships, his practice of quietly donating jewelry for charity auctions without taking tax deductions or public recognition. Bobby built something special, Tom says as he prepares to leave. Something that can't be replicated just by following business school formulas for retail optimization. I know, and I'm going to do everything I can to preserve what's salvageable, even if Derek isn't interested in maintaining his father's standards. That evening, Derek calls me directly instead of communicating through his attorney. His voice carries a different tone than I heard at the diner, less confident and more uncertain. Maggie, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about the business documentation you mentioned. What about it? I'd like to see what Dad left in that safety deposit box, not the jewelry, just the business records. Are you asking as someone who wants to understand what your father built, or as someone who's looking for legal ammunition to challenge my ownership of those records? I'm asking as someone who's starting to realize that Dad might have had reasons for his business practices that I didn't understand. This is closer to what I hope to hear from Derek, an acknowledgement that Bobby's decisions were based on knowledge and experience rather than sentimentality and resistance to change. Derek, I'm willing to share everything your father documented about the business, but I need to know that you're genuinely interested in learning from that information, not just looking for ways to justify the changes you've already made. What would that look like? It would look like you taking time to understand the supplier relationships before canceling more agreements. It would look like you talking to longtime customers about what they value about Chen's fine jewelry before implementing new policies that might affect their experience. It would look like you treating me as someone who has valuable knowledge about the business rather than as an obstacle to your plans. There's a long pause, and I can hear Derek breathing on the other end of the line. When he speaks again, his voice is quieter than before. I think I've made some mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, Derek. The question is whether you're willing to learn from them. Can we meet again? Tomorrow, maybe? I'd like to see those business documents you mentioned. I'll be at the bank at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. You're welcome to join me. At the bank? The documents are in the safety deposit box, Derek. If you want to see them, that's where we'll need to look at them. Another pause. Will you show me everything? The jewelry too? I'll show you everything your father wanted preserved. But Derek, I need you to understand that this isn't about dividing assets or negotiating inheritances. This is about understanding what your father valued and why he made the choices he did. I understand. I hope so. Because tomorrow, you're going to see the complete picture of what Bobby built and what he was afraid might be lost if the business was managed without appreciation for the relationships and commitments that made it successful. Derek agrees to meet me at First National Bank the next morning, and we end the call with something approaching cordiality. Whether Derek's apparent change of heart represents genuine growth or just tactical adjustment remains to be seen. But for the first time since Bobby's death, I feel hopeful that it might be possible to preserve at least some of what Bobby spent 46 years creating. The empty safe was never the real treasure, just as Derek's inheritance of the business locations and inventory was never the complete prize. The real treasure was the knowledge, relationships, and reputation that Bobby spent decades building. Tomorrow, Derek will finally understand what his father actually left behind, and what it will cost him if he continues to treat those intangible assets as expendable inefficiencies. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.